thank you for coming into the tea party. And as many of you know, this is my birthday month, August. My birthday was on Wednesday. So, with great jubilation and excitement, we have an epic speaker today and someone who is becoming a dear friend of mine. So I just want to just acknowledge that we are having Camille Richardson from, thank you, Camille. There she is, beautiful, coming to speak with us today. I hope everyone has their tea. I'm drinking chai today, chai tea, for a little bit of energy and zen. As you know, the Tea Party started pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, the very beginning. So 2.5 years ago, 29 months ago. So for us to continue to persevere is phenomenal. And we've had increasing numbers, decreasing numbers. People are zoomed out, but we're persevering because people have reached out and said, this was something that I gravitated toward. This is something that helped pull me through the pandemic and to continue to connect. As you know, this was a very personal experience for me because I wanted to make sure that I was still staying in contact with all of my incredible friends around the globe. And I said, they have rich experiences and rich knowledge that we can dive into and continue to grow, connect, and flourish as people and as women in particular. So we have moved from hope and possibility into resilience and looking at perseverance. And this year's theme of inspiration, to inspire one another, is really at the forefront. So everything we've learned over time and everything that we can learn in real time to actually support one another in our inspirations. So with no further ado, I'm going to put Camille's bio in the chat so you will have it firsthand, as well as her contact details. But I'd like to introduce this honorable woman that we have before us today. Camille Richardson. She is the Senior Foreign Service Officer for the U.S. Government Services and International Trade Administration. Camille and I originally met in Dubai, and I was just awed by just the power. We were sitting next to each other as Camille was moderating this panel on women in tech and innovation at the at the WELLTI Summit Trade Win event. And it was just a time where I felt, and I hope this was for you too, Camille, I'm still enamored, that energy, that connectivity, that we were actually able to meet the women and talk with them about digital transformation and economic empowerment and what that really meant on a global scale. So that was extremely impactful. I have since been working with Camille, so thank you again for that, and engaging on this pathway and this roadmap of encouraging and moving this WELLTI initiative forward to build an ecosystem that will help businesswomen seize their international trade and flourish as independent individuals to be empowered. So with no further ado, Camille Richardson. Good morning, Camille.
Good morning, Jeanice. Thank you so much for that really kind introduction. Thank you for inviting me to your global tea party. We've been talking about this for some time. I admit that I have coffee in my cup because I'm a coffee drinker. And so, of course, I'm fanning myself accordingly as the hot flashes ensue. But I just really appreciate this opportunity. I see women on from all different parts of the world, and that just really warms my heart. So it's just a pleasure to be here with you today and to take this opportunity to celebrate your birthday with you, and to celebrate, this network that you created, and this network of support and encouragement. And as you said, inspiration is so important these days. And this is the right moment especially for it, as diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility are really being embraced in both the public and the private sectors around the world.
Yes, thank you so much. Well, let's get to it because time is of the essence. So let's see if you could please stay muted. If we could do a little housekeeping, please stay muted. Utilize the chat as much as you like. I love to hear from you. Put your questions, commentary, and then at the end, about 15 minutes or so, we will have an opportunity to have questions and answers. Okay? Thank you so much. So, my question to Camille is, tell us about your journey. I mean, I've had the opportunity of getting to know her, but I want to get to know you. So just think, we're at home.
Okay.
You're in my
Yeah.
living room. This is our
Yeah.
tea party, right, ladies?
This is our tea
And
party.
this is our tea party. So Camille, tell us about your journey and how you got to be Deputy Assistant Secretary, which is amazing, and of the Department of Commerce. So tell us, talk to us about that.
Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity. Love to share my story. It's something that we've been doing for the WELLTI initiative, and the point is to inspire. So if anything I say inspires or touches you today, then I've done my job. So I'm a native of Washington, D.C., and I was, raised, middle class. But the one thing that my mom was really adamant about, being a teacher herself in the DC public school system, was just getting the highest quality education possible. And, both my parents were willing to make those sacrifices to ensure that I got into the best schools possible that would prepare me to propel me. I'll put it that way. So I think that early investment in education was really, really important. My mom actually taught me to read when I was 3 years old. And so I've had a love of reading and books and stories and imagination and creativity that was instilled in me at an early age. She also sent me to a bilingual preschool when I was about 2.5. So I got early exposure to other languages. And when I entered kindergarten, I started studying French. That was sort of the first thing that I started. I don't really speak it now. I understand a lot of it, but I actually studied French all the way through grad school. It's a beautiful language. It inspired me to travel. And I think that early exposure to other languages and cultures in elementary school, I went to school with girls from all over the world. My mother made me go to all girls schools all the way through high school. She didn't want any distractions. So I got to meet other girls, and young women from other cultures, speaking other languages, with different experiences early on. And I think that inspired me to study international relations at Brown University as an undergrad, and to continue with an international relations and diplomacy focus. I actually was reading an article in Time magazine when I was a sophomore in high school about nuclear winter, and I got really, really concerned. And that's what I think inspired the interest in diplomacy as a way of building peace. And as I've pursued my studies and entered my career, I've learned that peace and prosperity go hand in hand. And when countries have and companies have positive trading relationships, you tend to have that peace and prosperity, because who wants to mess with the flow of money and livelihood, right? So usually, you might have a disagreement, but it doesn't mean that you end up in a trade war or an actual war. So really, the international trade, I see it, and I've built a career in it, is a way of connecting people along lines of mutual interest, as a way of building prosperity and peace worldwide. So I think that's how I ended up with the Commerce Department. I came out of Johns Hopkins SAIS as my grad school in 1993, still speaking some French, since I had to speak it to get that degree. And I entered the Commerce Department through something called the Presidential Management Fellowship Program. It had a different name at the time. It was called the Presidential Management Internship Program, but then Monica Lewinsky came along and they had to change the name. So what that is it's sort of a fast track program for young execs in government. It's meant to attract sort of the best and the brightest, and to create a better class of bureaucrats, quite frankly. It's very competitive. And, students who are coming out of grad school, because you have to have a graduate degree, apply from all over the country. They compete to get in. They come to Washington for seminars and job searches, because just because you get into the program, it does not guarantee you a job. I came along at a time where I had done I had done some studies on Southeast Asia and environmental technologies and sustainable development, and that landed me a job with what was called the U.S.-Asia Environmental Partnership. It was a collaboration between the U.S. Agency for International Development and the U.S. Department of Commerce. And the idea was to put cessation experts all over Southeast Asia who could then facilitate the importation of environmental technologies from the United States. So that was my first job in Washington, D.C. I would coach environmental companies on this opportunity and direct them to this cadre of what we call technology representatives in the field. And then we would basically get the flow of trade going with these life-saving environmental technologies that could monitor or abate or clean up pollution and hopefully improve the quality of life for a very fast-moving, fast-developing region of the world that wasn't necessarily doing it in a way that would be considered sustainable. So that's how I started my career at the Commerce Department. And I stayed focused on environmental technologies exports for about 4.5, almost 5 years. And then I had the opportunity to work for our very first African-American Assistant Secretary. Her name is Lori Fitzpagato, and she was the Assistant Secretary for our commercial service, which is our foreign service. And she continues to be a friend and a mentor to this day. But it was just amazing to have the opportunity to work, with someone who was just so powerful and also empowering. I learned a lot from Lori, and she helped me she encouraged me to take our assessment, which is the commercial service exam. The commercial service is the diplomatic service of the Commerce Department, which is where I work. And so she encouraged me to take our commercial assessment. I passed, and I ultimately ended up getting assigned to our Miami U.S. Export Assistance Center, or USIAC. And that is one of about 106 offices that we have across the United States. But I got to work on sort of cool things. I didn't just do what a normal trade specialist does, which is great work, working hand in hand with small and medium-sized companies, introducing them to our services and other services that the U.S. government offers to help companies actually do business overseas. I'll get into that a little bit more later. But I was in that Miami office for about 2 years. And then I got my first assignment overseas as a foreign service officer with Commerce. So I started off in Buenos Aires. And this was in 2001, when the Argentine economy was falling apart. So it was a very historic and kind of dangerous time to be in Argentina. The portfolio I had changed pretty much overnight from one of trade promotion, getting companies there, offering them guidance, offering them services, helping them to connect with the right people to do business successfully, sharing the opportunities. That's what we do for trade promotion, or as part of what we do, to basically telling them not to come and helping them figure out how to get paid for the things they already shipped. So it went from trade promotion to trade complaints pretty much overnight, which was a really interesting education. Yeah, what happens when an economy falls apart and you've got 34 different currencies in circulation? The supply chain completely breaks down. Sound familiar? And how do you get paid? How do you manage that situation? So that was a fascinating first tour, for me as an officer. It was in a short time. After that, I got assigned to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And even though Argentina and Brazil are right next to one another, they couldn't be more different. It's almost like two universes sitting next to each other. It's amazing how different they are. But after an initial sort of rough 18 months of no social life and trying to figure it out, I managed to figure out my niche socially and professionally, and things just kind of took off from there. So I think I ended up getting promoted coming out of Argentina, and I might have gotten promoted again coming out of Rio. I can't remember the order of it, but fast moving. Rio is an oil and gas town, so there's lots and lots of opportunity there in the energy sector, but it's not the only game in town. There's also health, and there's infrastructure, and there's other opportunities. But Brazil was just amazing. I stayed in Rio almost 5 years. I actually extended because I just came to love it so much, and it still remains one of my favorite places in the world to be. After Rio, I ended up in Nairobi, Kenya, as the senior commercial officer. And so that meant that I was responsible for all of our commercial activities in that market. And it was again, an historic time to be in Kenya. They were holding their first democratic presidential election. And they had tried before, but tribal violence had kind of, not allowed that to happen. But the ambassador we had in place, Ambassador Ranneberger, just really worked very hard at helping them stick to a constitution that pretty closely mirrors our own, and to have a peaceful democratic election. So it was really an amazing time to be in Kenya. And while I was there, we actually opened up conversations and official commercial dialogue with the East African community. So that was Kenya plus the 4 countries in the EAC, Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, Kenya, and I forgot the other one, but I'm sorry, Tanzania, obviously. So, that was an amazing experience to be on that negotiating team with USTR and just negotiating with all 5 countries to get to a point where everyone was comfortable with signing a commercial dialogue sort of engagement. After that, I went to Mumbai, India, where I served for 3 years from 2013 to 2016, which was also an incredible experience. A lot of the lessons that I learned in Kenya, I was able to take forward into India. But India is one of those markets where it's so hard to wrap your mind around how big it is and how big everything is, right? So when you're talking about any sort of demographic, and you have a country of about, at the time, it was about 1.2 billion, I think it's bigger now. So anytime you're talking about demographic swaths, you're talking about 400 million people, larger than the population of the United States. You're talking about the middle class, 400 million people. You're talking about youth, 400 million people. You're talking about whatever way you sliced it, was always 400 million people. In my concert district, 400 million people. So energy needs, we're not talking about megawatts, we're talking about gigawatts. So just the scale and scope of India was just an amazing education. It's a multi-post country for us. So I think we had like 7 posts there. So I was heading up Mumbai, which of course is Bollywood, which was a good place to be. And just a really amazing experience working in another multi-post market. Brazil is also a multi-post market for us, a huge market for us. So after that, I ended up getting reassigned to Brazil. But I was in Washington for about 7 months working on other little projects. And then I went back to Brazil, but this time in Sao Paulo, as what we call a deputy senior commercial officer. So if the senior commercial officer could be like the CEO of, if the commercial service were a company in every country, would be the CEO of that company. So the deputy senior commercial officer is essentially the CFO and the COO. It was all about, operations and administration and running programs and, all the back office stuff that nobody really wants to do, but it's just so critical to learn. I think for any business, right? You have to know that to make sure you're not getting ripped off, or to make sure you're not overspending. That's what a DSCO does. And so we did that. I did that again in Brazil. And then the pandemic hit. So I was in Brazil from starting in 2017. And then by 2020, because it was a 4-year assignment, the pandemic had hit. And so I was kind of sitting there twiddling my thumbs a little bit, but before that even happened, I have a 91-year-old mother that I take care of. And I think that one of the reasons, I think you and I both realize that women are among those hardest hit by COVID, because in many cases we're caregivers.
Yes.
And we're responsible for parents, for families, for spouses, for children, whatever. We're typically trying to balance or juggle, work and life. And, work-life balance is kind of cliched, it's overused. And I think that we were kind of heading toward an attempt at work-life harmony. But the pandemic sort of reset everything. But before that, I had made the decision the previous November and had gotten permission to basically cut my tour short, to curtail, in order to come back to Washington, to bid on some jobs in Washington and to take care of my mom. So I got a job as executive director, actually sort of one level down, for the Middle East and Africa, and came home in April and started making the transition. And June 1, I started working as the executive director. June 4th, then Assistant Secretary Ian Steph calls me and says, I've made some executive calls that essentially obviate your job. So you're out of a job.
No.
Not really, but yeah, kind of. Yeah, because my job was going to be reassigned to someone on the civil side.
Okay.
It's I don't want to get into that whole story, but let's just say that I was told, 3 days later that my job pretty much would no longer be my
Some
job.
reorging. So even the
Some
government
reorging.
boards.
Yeah. So, but then he says, would you be interested in the next level up as deputy assistant secretary? And I was like, sure.
I love it. I love
Why
it.
not? Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
Okay.
that's great.
But the thing is this, when as officers, you don't just, unless it's your first assignment, you don't just get assigned a job. You actually have to bid and compete for the job.
Yes.
So there were 3 jobs available on an urgent basis, what we call urgent vacancies. And so it was this job, it was the deputy assistant secretary or DAS for China, and then it was an executive director for Europe. And I had I kind of put my bid list in order, and I called another friend and mentor who was also an officer and asked her what she thought. And she's like, oh no, you came here in good faith to take this job, and now you don't have it anymore. So you just put down that one bid, and they need to give you the job that you want. Okay, that's a bold move. So on July 7th, two major things happened. I closed on my home where I'm sitting right now, having found it the month before, and I submitted my one bid for this job.
Amazing.
And then sat there for the rest of the month, biting my nails, wringing my hands, like, what's gonna happen? When are they gonna meet? What's going on? So then on July 29th, the assistant secretary calls me and says, I just want to be the first to congratulate you before the list comes out. You are now the next deputy assistant secretary for Middle East and Africa. And I'm squealing and, fangirling and happy. And then his phone clicks. He said, hold on, let me grab this. So he clicks over and he comes back and he says, the secretary would like to congratulate you as well. So that was like, oh my God,
Exactly.
So Secretary of Commerce is on the phone to congratulate me. This is crazy. But it just sort of reaffirmed that I had come home at the right time and for the right reasons. Right. So I came home in April, June, new job, June, another job opportunity, July, job opportunity confirmed, also July, new home. And then in September, met the love of my life.
Oh, wow.
So, it was just kind of that magical alignment that happened that just reaffirmed Amazing. That I was here doing the right thing. And then as we started kind of thinking about, as the pandemic wore on, how can we continue to be of service? And this is well before anything came out of the US government on DEIA, anything that came out on women's empowerment. We just started thinking and talking, and a friend of mine, and her, Terry Batch, another good friend, another very dynamic woman, is sitting in LA, just came up with this idea and was looking for funding for it, of some sort of a trade mission to Africa that would really feature, 4 first ladies in key markets like Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana. It's like, wow, that's a really interesting kind of a moonshot idea for women's empowerment. How do we get there from here? And then we came up with this idea for what we called Women's Empowerment Leave Legacies Through Trade and Investment, WELLTI or WELLTI. And I kind of thought, well, it's kind of, if you're from the Caribbean, you could be saying wealthy, but just wealthy. But what we really wanted to do was just host women in Africa, starting in Africa, and have them tell their stories of how they overcame various business challenges by through a cultural or an educational or a financial relationship with the US, or just on their own. And the idea was to inspire women on this side of the pond to either get into the trade game or to up their game in trade. Mm-hmm. So we started off with a coffee chat in Kenya, and I don't know if I'm kind of bleeding into the next question, if you want me to keep going or not.
No, I think you're on a roll, and it sounds wonderful. Yeah, go for it. Love it. We're at home. We're having tea and coffee. right, ladies?
Chai and whatnot.
Yes,
Yeah, we got
yes.
our cups. So we had a woman who had kind of started off in like an Avon lady type situation, where she was importing beauty products from the United States and selling them kind of door to door. And she grew that. She overcame a lot of challenges, even within her own family, some inertia, figuring out the financing. But she kept doing it, and she ended up creating a line of pharmacies in Kenya from that basis, which
Wow.
was tremendously inspiring to the women on this side. And in fact, an exporter in Miami, raised her hand and said, "Hey, can I ship you my beauty products?" And she has. So we consider that a win. And
Absolutely.
we're a metrics driven organization, so we track that stuff, and it's really important to us, and it's also important to Congress in terms
Yes,
of the money that they give us, and
at
it's
the end of
important
the
to our
day.
clients too, because why else would you pay us for service if we didn't produce results?
Yes.
So that's how WELLTI was born, and it just really kind of took on this fast paced, organic, growth. It was well received everywhere. It quickly expanded from Africa to the Middle East when our commercial posts in the Middle East found out about it. And it has become a regional innovation, and other regions have followed suit with their own programming. So really, for the first time, and I've been with Commerce, it'll be 30 years next year. For the first time, there is a concentrated effort at the Department of Commerce to empower women and to empower other underrepresented populations. And part of that, yes, it is because this administration is very much focused on economic inclusion and making sure that happens. But I view WELLTI as a game changer. We broke new ground with this. We've laid some trails. And you, of course, Jeanice, have been super supportive since day one. All of those coffee chats culminated in a first ever summit in Dubai that we organize on top of our Trade Winds program. Now, Trade Winds is a well-established brand that our U.S. field. We have 106 offices, 106 USACs, U.S. Export Assistance Centers in the United States. And this is a very well-established brand where they're highlighting opportunities in a given region or a given country. This was the first time they had ever come to the Middle East and Africa. So trust me, this was a heavy, heavy lift. But then to throw in a women's empowerment summit at kind of the last minute with no money, it wasn't necessarily well received, but it still worked.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
we didn't compete with them. We scheduled our sessions so that we were adding value to the Trade Winds participants and people could come to our sessions. But you're right, after a year and a half or so of being on camera, the opportunity to meet in person and network in person was just, the joy was really palpable. The energy, the joy at the opportunity to connect. And we haven't really continued so much with the coffee chats as much as I would have liked, and hopefully we can pick back up on that. But we've had in-person events now. We've done it. We did Dubai, and that was followed by Jordan. We held one in Cote d'Ivoire, and then we also just did one in Marrakesh as part of the Corporate Council on Africa's annual business summit. So it has picked up steam everywhere that I visited virtually. I talked about it, and people were interested in wanting to be supportive. And it, as part of our Queen Maker Brain Trust or Queen's Trust, we meet every Friday. So anybody here who might be interested in that, let us know. And we figure out the WELLTI ecosystem, how we're going to actually grow this into something that is sustainable and can become institutional, and continue to get more women into trade, because we know that international trade can result in faster, more profitable, more prosperous, economic recovery. So that's the idea behind WELLTI.
And that international trade actually it becomes localized. It's
It
a
does.
local initiative whereby it impacts the mom who is a single parent taking care of the home. So, and thank you for the stories about the story of WELLTI and being on that first call with Kenya and several of the other coffee chats. I'm excited for what's going to happen in the future with those coffee chats, because it really gave an opportunity for women to say, this is what I'm doing, for the example that you gave, Camille, this is what I'm doing, and then to make a connection. And what I love about technology, as many of you know, I'm a tech enthusiast, is that we have these tools that we can connect and we can connect globally and connect easily and go off camera if we have to, but we connect, and it's a beautiful opportunity. But being a woman of color,
Yeah.
and being a woman and working
Mhm.
in the MENA region and in Africa, tell me about, those challenges. I mean, you had some incredible experiences working in Latin America and South America, and you talked about the economic challenges and the like, but I could imagine some of the gender challenges. And I'll throw it in, the
Yeah.
elephant in the room, some of the racial challenges,
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
speak to that. How through all of those transitions and nuances, how did you persevere, Camille?
It's a great question. And I see you offering me the opportunity to inspire on a platter, so I'm going to take it.
Go for it.
Yeah, I I guess it's just not really my come from. You know what I mean? Like it's obvious, but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily my come from. It's not a chip on my shoulder. It's not something that I see as something that holds me back. I am who I am, and I know what I know because I've worked hard to get there, right? And
Mhm.
so that's sort of the first thing. The second thing was, but and don't think that I started off that way, not by any means. But the one thing that's nice about working for the U.S. government is that you're working for the U.S. government, so they don't necessarily care who you are, what you look like most of the time. You're working for the U.S. government, and so we're dealing with each other on that basis. Now it's not always that way, but that's kind of sort of the top layer. Let's peel that back a little bit. There have definitely been times where as a woman of color, as a Black woman, where I've had to kind of figure out how to navigate things. I can be very direct in my communication style. That doesn't sit well with everybody. When you walk and you're confident because you're just not even really thinking about it, people get intimidated. That's not an intention on my part. That's a choice on their part, right? But it doesn't mean that I can't adjust to be, maybe less intimidating and more inviting. So I've had to, kind of maybe adjust my communication style or sort of think about things from their perspective. I actually had a mentor tell me this, and it really shocked me. But she's like, if you don't want to intimidate other women who are perhaps older and who might find you threatening, maybe consider dressing in gray.
Oh my. Oh, going back
Yeah,
that, remember back in I think the 90s or something like that, early 2000s, if you wanted to get along in business, you would wear the suit. You
mm-hmm.
remember that for everybody on the call? Um, you would wear the suit and the flat shoes or something like that, even a tie. There was a whole time where
There
we
was a whole
wore
movement, a
ties.
whole menswear movement. Yep.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Wow.
So what happened to me in Argentina? It started in Argentina. That was my first overseas assignment, and I found myself in a situation where, um, you know, traditionally the Foreign Service has been a boys' club, and the first members of that boys' club, or as they like to say, first time I heard this, I cracked up. They were all pale males from Yale. I just thought that was hilarious, but it's true. It was all about, it was very elite and exclusive club. I'm not saying that it isn't still elite or exclusive, but it's a lot more diverse in
Yeah.
terms of gender. It's probably about half and half now, and in terms of race and ethnicity, and even orientation, it's a very different service today than it was when it first started. Probably back in like the 1920s or something, or earlier than that. In the 1800s, or when this country was first founded, it was a foreign service. But at any rate, yeah, I found myself kind of facing the boys' club in a sort of a competing sector of the embassy, and I'm kind of by myself. And so I was talking to another friend and mentor. Notice how many times I mentioned mentors and friends. It is so important to have a support network.
Indeed.
People who you can talk to, who will keep your confidences, who will offer their perspective and sometimes their advice or their counsel. It's really, really helpful, because one of the worst places to be and where you don't want to be for very long is in that quadrant of where you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
You want to be at where I know what I know versus I don't
Right.
know what I don't know. And then there's others in between where you don't know what you know, which is not so good either, or you know what you don't know and you're going to figure it out, right? So you don't want to be in the I'm clueless part of the quadrant at all, or for a very short period of time, right? So this person said to me, wait a minute, haven't you been there longer than they have? Don't you know more about the market, and don't you have more connections than they do? I was like, you know what, you're kind of right about that. So then my come from my perspective, my framework completely shifted, and so did that relationship. That's another thing, the energy that you bring to the table.
Yes.
Your come from, it's not going to make you everybody's cup of tea, but as long as you know who you are and what you have to offer, people are going to have to respect that.
That's truth. And that's truth to power, ladies. Absolutely. So this inspirational journey of WELLTI and your incredible, rich career path thus far, and there's a lot more to go, has really, it's inspirational. And how can we, you mentioned several opportunities through ITA, through the Department of Commerce, and which is something that I just learned about. And I've been in business for 20 years and have been international for 12. So I feel as though I have tapped into a gold mine. I have tapped into a well that is so deep and so vast that I'm learning constantly. And I'm saying, now, what does that acronym mean? Who is that? What department is this? You know, that sort of thing, on its constant learning journey, and knowing that we have these plugins that we can go to and be able to get resources. So tell us, if we have, I know we have many entrepreneurs on the line, lots of CEOs and senior execs on the line. So thank you, ladies, for all being here. It's really wonderful to see you all. And welcome to those that have been here relentlessly. I have to throw that in. So with that said, how can they find assistance in all of this? And start formulating your questions also, because we're going to open it up for Q&A. So how could they go about it, Camille?
Thanks for that opportunity, Jeanice. So, I've worked with this organization, as I said, for almost 30 years. And we have had just the sticky, undesirable tagline of being the best kept secret in international trade. Why? Because we don't have a marketing budget. And so we rely on word of mouth. And all of you know that 9 times out of 10, if someone has a bad experience, they're more likely to share it and talk about it than if they have a good experience, right? So we can rely on word of mouth to a certain extent. What we also started doing, of course, is with the advent of the internet, is just taking advantage of keywords and metadata, and trying to get ourselves more positioned on Google. But again, if you're in that quadrant of I don't know what I don't know, you wouldn't know to look. But here's the thing, all of you who are in the United States who pay taxes, you all are basically shareholders in this global corporation that you know nothing about. So here we go. We're going to educate you today. So commercial service, as I mentioned, is the diplomatic arm of the Commerce Department, and we're within the International Trade Administration. So we fulfill Commerce's mission of growing the U.S. Economy, but through growing the global economy, and that's through forging these international trade connections. So if you're interested, if you're on the U.S. side and you're interested in taking advantage of our services, we have a website. It's just trade.gov, www.trade.gov.
He'll be in the chat.
My friend Karen has popped that in there, so you can just click on the link and start exploring. So now, if you're in the United States, I've already referenced this a couple of times. We have a U.S. network of 106 offices called U.S. Export Assistance Centers. So more than likely, there's one near you that you didn't even know about. And when these were first created, and I was around when they were first created, they were meant to be kind of one-stop shops. So in many cases, not every single time now, but in many cases, we're going to be co-located with the Small Business Administration. So SBA.gov is their website. And also co-located with the Export-Import Bank, which is exim.gov. So you've got small business advice, if you're entrepreneurial and looking to get into and looking to figure out how to kind of grow into this area. You've got Export-Import Bank that can offer financing, right? Both SBA and Exim Bank can offer financing, and you can look at those websites at your leisure, and we're linked to them, I'm sure. And then we have trade specialists who are there to help you. They're probably pretty much going to be focused on experienced exporters, But then they're also going to be linked into the state where you are. And those states have economic development offices, you know, with trade programs a lot of times that can kind of help you get to that point when you're ready. International trade is something that I would recommend for an experienced exporter. But you can get that experience. You can dip your toe by, you know, even just sending something to Canada. You know, it's close by. It's a friendly enough market. You know, you help them. They'll help you do your market research. We have commercial posts all over the world, and I see Karen's busily popping links into the chat that you can look at later. You know, where you can think about, okay, I have a product or a service even that I'd like to export. How do I do that? And so those resources that are there on the ground in the United States to help you figure that out, to help you develop that business model. And they'd even gotten to a point where they started taking on a Six Sigma model. And once you've kind of gotten your feet wet and you've gotten the experience and you've got the rhythm of it, and you kind of want to grow, you want to up your game in trade, then, you know, they can sit down and just basically map it out with you. So we have our international trade specialists there, you know, at these UZACs all over the United States to help you do that. And then they work with our commercial posts overseas. So as an officer, I would go overseas to staff a commercial post, which is the journey I was describing earlier. And we work with locally engaged staff. So if I'm in Brazil, we have a team of Brazilians who are focused on, they're experts in different various industry sectors. They got government contacts, they got local contacts, and they can help you enter a market. And that typically happens, especially if you're small, you want to find a partner. You want to find an agent or a rep or a distributor who can help you, a trusted partner. And so we can help you come up with a contact list. We can facilitate those meetings. We can help you find interpretation services if that's needed, help you find a driver because you got to come visit. You can't just do all this remotely. You got to be prepared to go over there. I like to compare international trade to dating because it's about relationship building, right? So you're going to go over there, you're going to have some speed dates, and you're going to pick somebody, and then you're going to get into a relationship with them. But before you sign that contract, before you get into a legally binding relationship, we can also help you do background checks because it's so important to do that due diligence, to understand who you are getting into a relationship with for the long haul. Because if you try to break a contract in a foreign country, God love you, you're going to end up in the legal system. And so it's our job to help you to minimize those risks, to de-risk that venture, that transaction, by helping you find the right partner and to help you ease into that relationship.
Those collaborations that you mentioned are key for SMEs. And also, if I may add that a resource that I tapped into in learning about all of these various agencies is that their support in your local state for the trade missions, for improving your website. I mean, in wealth of resources. So thank you, Karen, for popping those links in, and anything that you all miss, I'll send it out to you in a thank you email, post the meeting to, excuse me, the tea party. What am I talking about meeting? The tea party today. So thank you all for coming into my home today. Again, let's have some questions. I know that you have some for Camille. You've heard about her incredible leadership and perseverance, her agility. Now that's a true leader. And as I said, there was that energy that just sitting next to her, I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm getting my energy matched and it's up at 10x. So it's quite exciting to have such that experience of leadership available. Any questions? I know that there's some questions because we have some individuals, some CEOs from Canada. I'm not calling anyone out.
Well,
we've actually gone into partnership.
Let me say this, Jeanice. If you're not an American citizen, and then we actually do have services for folks outside the United States as well. Mm-hmm. So we have a buyer program where we can organize buying delegations and bring you guys into the United States to various industry trade shows. We have an investment promotion program called Select USA, and Jeanice, you participated in this year's summit. And the idea is if you are ready to globally scale your business and become competitive globally, then you might want to consider investing in the United States. So we have an annual summit, and it's huge. It's like 3, 4, 5,000 people who come to Washington every year, and it's for the gigantic networking and information session.
Yes.
And under the pandemic, we had to go completely virtual. And Karen has just popped the link into the chat for the next Select USA Summit is going to be in May of 2023. So there are also services for those of you who are interested in partnering with the United States from your end that we can certainly support. And there are other government agencies that help do go the other way. So, for example, Prosper Africa. If you're focused on Africa, we want to make sure that there's no wrong door. So whether it's sort of trade flows from the US to Africa, or from Africa to the US, or investment flows, two-way investment flows, Prosper Africa can point whoever is interested in the right direction.
Excellent, excellent. So Wendy, you have your hand up. Thanks for joining us from Detroit.
Yes.
It's another partner.
Yes, hi, Dr. Jeanice, and hi, Camille Richardson. I know we probably sat on a few panels and moderated, but as you were speaking, and thank you for your inspirational talk, I was off camera for a little bit managing my 1-year-old, who was another story. The question I had as you were speaking, I was just thinking, especially with WELLTI, is there, how they have like the President's Council on Africa, Advisory Council on Africa that's focuses, is there like a women's council as well that is being created, or it's in the works of being created, that could support those type of initiatives? Because I know that I personally am very interested in that type of work, and have been working with U.S. Commercial Services here in Michigan, and dabbled, been to the U.S. Africa Summit, spoken and such. But is there like a council that kind of anchors and roots us into all the work that we're doing in that area? I don't know.
That's a great question, Wendy. And not yet. I wouldn't be surprised if it, was in the works. But the President's Advisory Council on Doing Business in Africa, or the PAC-DBIA, the new class was just instituted, I think, a couple months ago. And we're actually hoping to work with them very closely as we create a U.S. Africa Business Forum that's coming up in December. It'll be part of the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit. And we haven't had either one of these events since, I think, 2016. So for the first time in 6 years, it'll be a very big focus on Africa, and we'll be very active. Now, I will say this, as we were putting the WELLTI program together, and as I would pay virtual visits to posts and kind of get information and meet with different leaders in government and banking and law and other areas, and everybody was really, really receptive to, and everyone seems to have some sort of a women's empowerment program. So one of our goals under this WELLTI ecosystem that we're creating is to capture that information. Kind of where can you go and how do you take advantage of these programs, and we help to feature speakers. We want to build capacity. That was one of the lessons we learned as we did these coffee chats with like kind of a market focus, is that there hasn't always been a universal need for capacity building and for access to finance. And I don't think it matters what gender you are on the ladder, especially if you're a smaller company or an entrepreneur. There's always issues with access to finance, but especially for women. But to answer your question about the council, I think that's a great idea. I know that the administration has kind of a gender equity initiative going, and I know that Karen has been kind of tracking that. Karen, I don't know if you were able to come on mic and maybe comment on that, but I have not heard anything about a council being formed, but I think it's a great idea.
Yes, it is. Thank you for that question. We need to move that forward, Wendy.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in supporting that, but just an observation I've made, especially since it's becoming a really big focus and the work that we're doing. So thank you for that response.
Absolutely. Hi, Debbie. How are you today?
I'm very blessed. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent.
This was so fascinating. Thank you. Sorry. This was so fascinating. I really appreciate the background that you gave as far as your upbringing and how your mom planted all these different things in you as far as your languages and your education. I'm in the education field, and so as far as I am working internationally, I'm on the side that's internationally with the children that I work with. And so I just wanted, you know, some insight in like the best way to plant seeds into them for the future. And then also, so two-part question, that's my first one. And my international Jamaica Kelly is walking by. And also in regards to internationally, I know that here there's, you know, needs that the government has that needs to be met. And I would love to be able to find out internationally what those needs are in order to kind of target those areas. If there's places that you can refer me to internationally in order to find out. So two-part question. Seeds for the children, the best thing to speak into them as the director, and then also internationally to be able to get into the governments and help in those areas.
Okay, a few ideas. So first of all, you know, so beyond the exposure to other languages and cultures and the opportunities to interact with other children, their peers who come from other countries, that's one level. Being able to go and experience firsthand is so important. So I was very blessed also with an opportunity when I was, I think about 15 years old. I got to go, a neighbor had their church and was organizing kind of a summer, I'll call it a summer camp experience in a chateau in the south of France.
Fabulous.
So, you know, I was still speaking reasonable French at that point in time and got to go with a group of kids and stay in the chateau, which is kind of a crazy experience in and of itself. But it was an amazing experience just to be able to go to France and have that experience, you know, as a child. Also, you know, coming out of college, I'd done an African dance program. And so I talked my parents as a graduation present into sending me to Senegal on a dance program for another couple of weeks. So just, you know, and, you know, just, or even maybe it's a family vacation someplace else, you know, outside of the United States or to parts of the United States that are not common to our culture, like go to the Bahamas, I don't know, someplace accessible, go to the Caribbean, go someplace where it's not that hard to hop on a plane, or Mexico, you know, and just have that exposure is so important. Another thing that we did, and this was at the grad school level, but could certainly be replicated, I think, you know, for younger ages, is that a colleague of, well, a friend of mine at the time, we were in grad school together, we started doing outreach to DC public schools, and we would run diplomacy simulations. So we would take an actual historical incident or a current event and break it down and have them break up into different teams and come up with a diplomatic solution or go to war or whatever so every group is always going to come up with a different answer, but just going through that exercise. And, you know, you could probably find a local grad school that's international that would probably love to help you figure that out because it would be an interesting project. And we actually got a grant from Hopkins for that as well, made it into Hopkins magazine. Because it was just such an interesting, you know, and innovative outreach program.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Now, in terms of the second part of your question, we are organized globally around industry teams, right? So we are always promoting education, U.S. educational services abroad. I'm not sure if you're in the United States, but assuming that you are. You know, it would be fairly easy through the trade.gov website, or we can connect you to the head of our education team lead, our global education team. And so you could maybe talk with them or a local trade specialist for you about what those opportunities are, you know, maybe to partner with an international institution overseas.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, Davida. How are you? Oh, you garbled. You are garbled.
Beautiful smile and really bad sound quality.
Yes. Oh, no, we can't hear you. Can you type it out, Davida? Okay, try to type it out, please. Sorry, we can't communicate with you verbally. Are there any other comments or questions?
Let me fill the space by highlighting one other one other sort of resource or a few other
Sure.
resources that I didn't really
Is
mention.
this better at all?
Much better.
Yes. Yes.
I wear hearing aids in both of my ears, and sometimes I get feedback,
Oh, okay.
and that is a big thing right there with hearing aids. But thank you so much, Dr. Jeanice and Sister Camille. I tell you, this was a beautiful tea party, so much information.
Great.
And I'm driving from Saginaw back to Jackson, getting ready to go to London tomorrow.
Mhm.
And when I get back to the States in a week, I'm going to be ready to hit the ground running,
Excellent.
going to this commerce, getting this information, growing my business and empowering young women. Because that's what I do. I empower young women, girls aged 12 to 21. And they got to get up and go. I'm ready to go. You lit some fire in me, Miss Richardson, honey. I'm ready to go.
That's awesome.
Excellent, Davida. I'm so
Well, thank you.
excited for you.
Thanks, Davida. That's great.
And
So-
you
so what
are,
are-
your business is growing. Sorry, Camille.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I defer to you.
No, please.
Well, I was just going to say,